Alright, if you've stuck with us this far, this presentation ends up being really the application of what we've covered up to this point. This is where, for those who play an instrument, and even if you're a vocalist and really just trying to understand what the chord progressions mean and what they're doing, this is where it becomes really applicable and where it becomes very useful. So in this, we're going to cover what Jeremiah Jones called number theory, and music theory people just call it Roman numeral analysis. The idea here is that instead of looking at chord letters, we'll look at them in numbers, in terms of where the chord is, where the root of the chord is, as a degree of the scale that the key is in. So in this, we'll just give an introduction to what number theory is, or what Roman numeral analysis is. Then we'll talk about how do you identify the key that a tune is in, even if the lead sheet doesn't say, or the lead sheet may actually be wrong. And that's really important for understanding the rest of the chord structure. And then at the end, we'll go a little bit into application. How do you apply this on your instrument? So instead of using the names of the chords like A or D minor, G7 or F sharp or what have you, we're going to identify the chords by their degree in the scale that the key of the song is in. It takes a little bit of work, but this has some really, really important benefits. It simplifies transposition, which means that you can take a lead sheet and play it in a completely different key without having to do a whole lot of work. If you understand the progression, you can play it in a different key, and so if it's in an uncomfortable range to sing in, you can change where it's sung by changing the key without changing the structure of the song. It'll help you understand the progression of the song, so this will help with composition if you're going to write any tunes. These are the patterns that you'll see here that emerge are really, really common patterns in not only the music that we sing, but popular music and just about any Western music, Western Hemisphere music. And then on with capos and keyboard transposition, it ends up meaning like we have to rewrite the song and give the chords different names, and this helps to alleviate that. We could just read a lead sheet in whatever key and play it in a different key. One of the nagging problems with Planning Center is that if you just drag in a PDF that came off the internet somewhere, it doesn't know the key that the song is in, and so it becomes very difficult to have Planning Center do the transposition for you. If you can read a lead sheet in Roman numerals rather than the letters that are there, or you know the letters there and immediately think of them in Roman numerals, then it doesn't really matter what Planning Center has. You can take a lead sheet that's written in A and you can play it in B, just looking at the same lead sheet. And again, as I had mentioned, this is really, really important knowledge for composition. If you're going to compose tunes, then these structures are very, very familiar to our ears. So rather than using the letters for the chords, we're going to use Roman numerals. So the Roman numeral identifies the root tone of the chord as the degree of the scale. So the Roman numeral 1 is the root of the scale of the key that it's in, 2 is the second tone in the scale, 3 is the third, etc. The capitalization of the chord identifies whether the chord is major or minor. So if it's capital, then that's a major chord, and if it's lowercase, then that's a minor chord. And then in a major key, the same degrees are always going to be the same quality. A picture is worth 1,000 words. This is in the key of C, but if you did this in G or F or what have you, 1, 4, and 5 are always going to be major chords. So looking at this, C, E, and G is a major chord, F, A, and C is a major chord, G, B, and D is a major chord. In a major key, 2, 3, and 6 are minor chords. So we've got D, F, and A. That's the 2 chord. That's a minor chord. D to F is a minor third. The 3 chord is E, G, B. E to G is a minor third. And then 6 is A, C, and E. And so A to C is a minor third, so that's a minor chord. In a major scale, that's always going to work the same way. You don't see a chord built on the 7th tone very often. They do exist, and those are diminished, which is a little bit weird. It's based on 2 minor thirds, so it's not a minor third and a major third, it's actually 2 minor thirds. So B to D is a minor third, and D to F is a minor third. Those are pretty uncommon, though. So if you remember these, that 1 is major, in other words, a major third and then a minor third. 2 and 3 are minors, meaning a minor third and then a major third. 4 and 5 are major, which is major third, minor third. 6 is minor again, minor third, then major third. And then 7 is diminished, so it's based on 2 minor thirds. Again, those are pretty, the 7 chord, or a chord based on the 7th degree is pretty uncommon, but the rest of them are fairly common. So going back to this list, you can see 1, 4, and 5 being major chords, 2, 3, and 6 being minor chords, and then we use that little degree sign on 7 to show that the 7 is a diminished chord. So if you just remember that, with no accidentals, that 1, 4, and 5 are the major chords. And these are the ones that are perfect intervals from the first tone of the key. So a perfect octave, a perfect fourth, a perfect fifth. So 1, 4, and 5. 2, 3, and 6 are the minor chords, and then 7 is diminished. In a major key, without any accidentals, no key changes or what have you, this is going to be the case. 1, 4, and 5 are major, 2, 3, and 6 are minor, and then 7 is diminished. If you can remember that, then it makes identifying the key of the song pretty easy. Take a little break here and do a pop quiz. If you think through all of the songs that we play, do we play more major chords or minor chords? In other words, do they just have, when they're written on a lead sheet, is it usually just the name of the chord without an M, or do most of the chords have a little M after the name? Think about that for a minute. And here's kind of the answer to that. I just took a sampling of tunes that we played. I took the lead sheet and I did Roman numeral analysis on it and came up with these percentages. Again, this is just a sampling of of songs that we've done. This is certainly not everything that we've ever played, but this is a pretty good representation of what you'll see. The largest percentage is the 1 chord, a major chord, 29%. 21% is the 5 chord, and then just behind it at 20% is the 4 chord. Those 3 chords make up nearly 75% of all the chords that we play in all the songs. If you add to that the 6 chord, which is a minor chord, you get well over 75%. And then that little purple wedge there is a 7th chord, or a 7 chord built on the 6. So a 6/7 is how you would say that. So if you're in the key of E, that would be C. If you're in the key of E, that would be C sharp minor 7. So if you just add those 2 wedges together, because the chords are very similar, the 6/7, you just add a 7th to the 6th chord. If you add those 2 together, that gets you almost 80% of all the chords that we play between 1, 4, 5, and 6. If you know that 1, 4, 5, and 6 are the most common chords that we play, that makes identifying the key of the song pretty easy. So how do you identify the key from a lead sheet? Again, almost all of the tunes that we play are in a major key. And so a quick way to find it, or to find the key, is look for the three major chords that get used over and over again, and then the two that are a major second apart, in other words, E to, or A to B, or E to F sharp, or C to D, those are probably going to be the 4 and 5 chords of the tune. That's almost 100% the case. There's going to be a little bonus round in the end of the presentation where I'll show you a little bit of a trick to that. But what that bonus round is pretty rare, or not pretty rare. It's not uncommon, but you won't see it a whole lot in what we do. So the major that's a fourth below the lower of those two, or a fifth below the higher of the two, that's your key. So if you've got A and B and D, then, or I'm sorry, E, A, B, and E, then it's going to be the key of E. E to A is a perfect fourth, and E to B is a perfect fifth. And so E would be the 1 chord, A would be the 4, and B would be the 5. If you've got a lot of G's, C's, and D's, then it's probably the key of G. C being the 4 chord and D being the 5 chord. Sometimes the first and last chords of the song are going to be the root, or what the key of the song is in. And particularly for older hymns, it was really, really important. I don't want to say important because the rules are observations that we've made. They weren't rules for writing a song, and then we built our songs around this framework. We did what sounded right, and then what we observe today is what we consider to be rules. But usually a song would begin and end on the same chord, and everything would progress based on what that chord was. So if you want to hit pause here, just take a second and look and just try to figure out what key this is in. And if you're coming back now, if we look, the major chords that show up over and over again are C, F, and G. There's a G sus, and then followed by G, and so, but really C, F, and G show up over and over again. This is a really common key for us, and this would be the key of C. So C is the 1 chord, F major is the 4 chord, and G is the 5 chord. And also this chorus begins and ends on C, which is another hint that you can use. It doesn't always begin and end on the same on the root chord, particularly with newer stuff where sometimes it'll end with a bridge or end with a tag, or you'll go back to the bridge, or you'll end on a verse instead of the chorus, or something like that. But a lot of times it will begin and end on the same chord. Alright, I'll give you a second to figure out what key this one is in. And if you're back, the major chords that we see over and over again are A, E, and B, or E, A, and B. So E to A is a perfect fourth, and E to B is a perfect fifth. So we're probably in the key of E. There's this E over G sharp, which is not that weird. That's actually a 6/7 chord. Or I'm sorry, that's not a 6/7 chord. That is a 1 chord in first inversion. But other than that, nothing really weird here. C sharp minor, that would be the 6 chord of the key. And remember that the 6 chord is also, the 6 minor chord is very common as well. So if we go back to our chart, remember that 1, 4, and 5 cover almost 75% of the chords that we play, and so if you can identify the key of the song, then 1, 4, and 5 should just fall into place, and then you've already identified 70% of the chords in most of the songs that, or in a common song, that's going to cover 70% of the chords in the tune. So once we've identified what the key of the song is, and we also know what 1, 4, and 5 are, then filling in the rest is just a matter of figuring out where that is in the degree of what scale degree that's in. So if we go back to how deep the Father's love, remember we had figured out that this was in C, and so we mark all the C's with 1 because that is the root of the scale. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. C is 1. Then we can mark all the F's with 4s. And then we can mark all the G's with 5s. And then all that's left is the minor chords. And we've got D minor a few times. That's the 2 because C, D, we're in the key of C. So C, D, E, F, G, A is 6. So that A minor in the third line is the 6th chord. And so we've just applied Roman numerals to this entire chorus here. So, and I'm going backwards. All right. So if you've got a few tunes, I would encourage you to take them out and go through and mark what you can, and try to get in the habit of, instead of doing what we did in the presentation where we mark all the 1 chords and 4 chords and 5 chords, try to get to where you can identify the key of the song, and then as you read the chords, just know what number they are. So if we go back to the unmarked version of this, if you can look at that and go, C is 1, D is 2, C is 1, F is 4, C is 1, G sus and G are 5, C is 1, D is 2, C is 1, F is 4, C is 1, G is 5. If you can go linear like that, then it will make the application of this as you're playing, or being able to do transposition on this, much easier if you can do it linearly. If it's hard to do linearly, then just go ahead and mark all the 1, 4, 5s, and if there's a possibility when we're playing that we're going to do something in a different key, then do yourself a favor and print them out beforehand and write down the intervals or the Roman numerals before practice. So I told you that there's going to be a bonus round, and this is that bonus round. I'll give you a few minutes to look at it. You might want to hit the pause button, and if you're not really comfortable with the parts that we've done up to this point, you might want to skip this for a little while. It does get a little bit weird, but if you're comfortable with that, then I'll give you a few minutes to look at this, hit the pause button, and see what you can figure out. Now, if you're coming back, then kudos for just taking the time to actually try to do the analysis on this. It's not terribly weird, but there is one weird chord in the middle of it. If we look, there's G, D, and A over and over again. So G and A, probably the 4 chords, which means that D is the 1 chord. And so if we mark all those, then we've got 1, 4, 5, 7. 5, 7 is very common. 1, and so those fill in very nicely. The E minor 7 also fills in very nicely because that's the 2 chord, and we build a 7th on that, and so we're home free, except for in the second line, this E sitting all by itself. What in the world is that? Remember, in a major scale or in a major key, the 2 chord is supposed to be minor. Why would it be major in this case? And in order to understand that, we'll kind of look at this. This is an older hymn, and it's based on some older composition patterns. In more modern music, we go 4 to 1. 4-1 is a pretty common ending progression. But in older music, 5-1 was that common progression. We would go 5-1 or 5-7-1, 5-7-1, 5-7-1. A Tchaikovsky symphony, if you listen to the end of the symphony, just over and over and over and over and over again, you've got 5-1, 5-1, the timpani going bum, 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 over and over, just letting you know what 1 and 5 of the tune were, reminding you what the key of the song was in. And so if you look at the first line, we've got 1, 4, 5, 7, 1, 4, 5, 7, 1. That is, in classical music, that is the absolute most common progression. 1, 4, 5, 7, 1. 1, 4, 5, 7, 1. Or you may have 1, 2, 5, 1. But 1, 4, 5, 7, 1 is the most common just 4-chord progression in classical music. So knowing that we go 5-1 is pretty important here. If we look at the second line, we go 4-1, and then we don't. What in the world is this E major? Remember that E should be if we're in the key of D, then the E chord should be minor. If we were to take out the second, just part of the second line by itself, and just cover no shadow of turning with thee, we go. That's A, D, and E. And so now we've got another major key here in the middle of this. If we look at A, D, and E as being in the key of A, then A is the 1 chord, D is the 4 chord, and E is the 5 chord. Which is a little bit backwards from what we were looking at before, because we were in the key of D. Now if we think of this line as being in the key of A, then we've got 4, 5, 1. Again, a very common progression. 4 leads to 5, 5 leads to 1. And so if we think about this line, or those 2 chords being in the key of A, then that E makes sense. That E being a major chord makes sense. And so if we put that in context, the way that that ends up getting written is 5 of 5, which means that E is actually not the 2 chord, it's not like a 2 major chord, it's actually a, it behaves or functions as the 5 chord leading to A. Somebody in one of the first presentations had asked, or when we did this live, had asked, do we see a lot of 4 of 5s or 5 of 4s or 5 of 5s? Like I said, they're not really common in older tunes. They happen, and they do happen from time to time in newer tunes. So if you think of that last part of that line as being in the key of A, very briefly being in the key of A, then E becomes the 5 chord in the key of A. And then you put that in context, we're not actually doing a key change, we're just setting up. Remember, we go 5-1, 5-1, 5-1. And so another common progression is to go 1, and then not 2 major, but 5 of 5. So 1, 5 of 5, followed by 5. And what it does on the next line is actually really, really common in classical music, where you go back to a dominant 7th chord. So 5 to 5-7, back to 1. That really, really shows you what the tonality is. The dominant seventh chord, you can play one on the piano, and your ear just naturally hears what the next chord is supposed to be. Because that construct is so common, you just know what the root of the next chord is. And so we do that to we use that very same construct to lead us up to 5. And so that's where why that E major chord is there, when it should be, when otherwise it would be minor. So remember, this is in the key of E or D, and so G would normally be just G natural, but for that one chord, it's G sharp. And so we've got E, G sharp, B, which leads us to an A chord, A, C sharp, E. That being the 5 chord, which leads us to the D chord on the next line. So that one's a little bit of a challenge, and so sometimes if you see a major chord on what should be what you think should be the second interval of the tune, a lot of times that functions as 5 of 5. So how do you apply this? I would say the first thing is just practice, practice, practice. Pull out all the lead sheets you can and figure out what the Roman numerals are. Try writing them out linearly so that you can identify just as you go. Oh, 1, 2, 5, 4, 6, 1, 6, 4, 1, 5. Just calling them out like that. That's going to help you with all the application later on, which is how do you do this on your instrument. So learning your written intervals is really important as well. Just knowing that A to E is a perfect fifth without thinking about it. Just knowing that C to F is a fourth without thinking about it. Or the inverse of that, F to C is a perfect fifth without thinking about it. Knowing about the sharps and flats and where those happen is important as well. So A to C is not a major third, that's a minor third. So A to C sharp is the major third. Knowing those intervals and being able to identify them at sight or when they're written out on the lead sheet will really help. Learn your instrument. So if you play bass, learn the pattern for a major scale, and this works on guitar if you're playing solos and such as well. Learn the patterns for the major scale, and then be able to move that major scale everywhere on the neck. On guitar, if you want to play some of these songs without a capo, learn the bar chords. There are two major chord shapes. The E major chord, I believe. Trying to remember now, I don't have a guitar sitting in front of me, but the E major chord and the A major chord shape, you can bar those and play them all the way up the neck. The minor chords work the same way. The A minor chord and the E minor chord you can play with the last three fingers on your left hand rather than the first, and so you can use your index finger to bar those. And with those four shapes, you can play all the major and all the minor chords. If you're a keyboard player, you probably already know that you've had it drilled into you from day one that you need to learn all 48 scales. You need to be able to do the 12 major scales. You need to be able to do all 36 minor scales, the pure minor, harmonic minor, and melodic minor. And then also it'll help to be if you can read flat keys in sharps. For example, what a keyboardist would normally see as B flat. On guitar, it's going to be written as A sharp, and the lead sheets are generally written for guitarists. And so, be prepared to see something in a really odd key like A sharp, which has 10 sharps. The same key to what you're used to seeing is probably going to be B flat, which only has 2 flats. But be prepared to read those flat keys in sharps. And then if we apply this, go back to guitars on this and just think about using the capo. If you remember that 75% of our chords, or almost 80% of our chords, are covered by 1, 4, 5, and 6, or 6, 7. So those are G, C, D, and E minor. Those are really easy chords to play on the guitar. And so the capo changes the timbre of the guitar, particularly as you go higher up the neck. But you could play every tune in G and just read the numbers instead of the letters. And so if it's in the key of E, then E, A, and B are 1, 4, and 5. And so every time you see an E, it's a 1. And so just play G instead of E. If you think in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, the Roman numerals, it is a faster transposition process than trying to figure out, okay, it's written in E, we want to play it in G, and so we have to transpose every chord up a minor third. Instead of thinking of transposing every chord up a minor third, just think of the key that you're looking at in terms of Roman numerals. So that's how you deal with capos. For vocalists, remember the patterns and the chords and the scales are going to be the same intervals between notes. So you're going to have the same if you're singing a harmony, the interval between you and the melody is going to be the same regardless of the key that you're in. And so just being able to sing, if you take a favorite song and figure out what the first note is, play that on the piano, singing the tune in that scale, and then play a different note on the piano and be able to sing the same tune in a completely different key, just by changing that start note. It's really hard for me. I'm a bad vocalist, and it's hard for me to hear. I hear the Star Spangled Banner in the key of A flat, and I can play a different key on the keyboard, and for some reason I just can't make my mind do the gymnastics. So kudos to the vocalists who are able to change keys like that. I'm, for whatever reason, not able to do it. But that's the application for a vocalist as well, is just being able to play a different key on the keyboard and be able to sing the very same part. Just the intervals are all exactly the same, but the notes are different. And that is Roman numeral analysis. Thank you for staying with us. I hope that this was beneficial to you, and really, really do practice taking some lead sheets and figuring out the Roman numerals, and then see if you can, once you've written down the Roman numerals, if you can play that same tune in a different key just by looking at the Roman numerals rather than looking at the letters that are written on the lead sheet. A couple of people have tried this already and have found great success in doing it, and so if you've stuck with it this far, I hope you get some real benefit out of it. Thank you.